Hello, Queeros and Gen Emmers. In my last post, I came out as on the spectrum and mentioned that I'm also queer and an author. These are three things that I will be talking about a lot in the posts to come. I will also be talking about how I've been masking my autism, and even though I've been doing it unintentionally, I've been doing it, and how I'm starting to unmask to have a happier life. And there's a definite overlap between these two things, my autism and my queerness. So, for example, the story that I'd like to share with you today. So picture it. 4-year-old Stephen Berezny enters a mall with a magazine bookstore, and it's a strip mall, so it's kind of shady, but it does the trick. It's small, it's dusty, and it's poorly lit. It's got carousels of young adult and kids books, and those are the things that I'm supposed to be looking at. I mean, I'm 4 years old, so it would have been the kids' books. But while my mom and my brothers were distracted, I discovered something other than the kids' books, specifically the magazine rack, which had a bodybuilding magazine. And I saw it, and my eyes lit up, and I'm just like, what is this? I'd never seen guys like this. I was fascinated and mesmerized. And I have this vague memory of showing my older brother, who had been like a year and a half older than me, so like 5.5. And his reaction and what he said to me made it pretty clear that this was not a magazine that I should be looking at, and that this was weird. And so already at the age of 4, I was learning and absorbing this message of keep things hidden, and by association, I was picking up some shame. Having said that, whenever we went back to this store, it didn't stop me. I was just more secretive, and I would always look at those magazines and be completely like the first time I'd seen it. And so there I was forming this fascination that was very much out of sync with my age for something. And this is very common with people on the spectrum, although usually it's like wanting to take things apart and figure out how they work, or putting things into categories and making lists. So yeah, getting fixated on a bodybuilding magazine is a little bit of an unusual example, and the fact that there was arousal associated with it was also pretty queer. And so there I was at a very young age, learning to mask my autism and to put certain things into the closet and to keep this secret and to keep it hidden. And I think that this contributed to my ability to mask, because I was learning this skill at a very, very early age. And the problem with it, and sorry, I should explain that what masking is in autism circles is to cover up a trait or to hide a behavior that makes one stick out. And a person doesn't even need to know that they're autistic to be doing this, which is certainly the case for me and a lot of people who are diagnosed later in life in adults, because they've just been covering it up. And the problem with it is that it's often taking away something that gives me joy, or calms me down, or makes me feel right on a fundamental level. And instead I'm feeling shame, I'm feeling wrong on a fundamental level. And so I've cut off my access to one thing, but then I'm also feeling this shame along with that. And it's really worn me down over the years. And this is often the case for people on the spectrum. So part of how I'm reclaiming that story, and part of how I am unmasking and how I'm reclaiming my joy, is through my writing. So in the case of the Wattpad edition of Queeros, there's the character of Troy, who at the age of 8 discovers a muscle magazine. And like myself, it blows his mind. And it also puts him in a dangerous situation, much more so than what I experience, and it embeds him with an even deeper sense of shame. So I've exaggerated and fictionalized it. And so one way that story could go is Troy could be like, well, I'm never going to look at a magazine like this again. And that never occurs to him, just as it never occurred to me, quite the opposite. And so what he does do is he finds a way to make this muscle magazine a part of his life, because he starts to work out, which reminds me of another story about myself and how I started working out as a cover so that I could have these magazines in the house as well. And I should probably mention there was no internet at the time, so I did what I had to do, and I'll save that story for another time. But what I will say is that, ironically, fitness became an important part of my life, accidentally. It's helped me to challenge assumptions about myself and what I can do. It's empowering me because if I want to, I know that I can make changes in myself. It's helped me strengthen my mind-body connection, and like many people on the spectrum, I did grow up feeling very disconnected from my body and feeling very disconnected from my feelings and my emotions. And fitness has also given me structured social outlets through CrossFit and water polo. And I really much prefer this way of socializing because, one, I'm getting something done, and it's not this chaotic free-for-all like going to a club or to a dinner party where I'm constantly having to improvise. But I can talk about how I did take improv to kind of help with that. So look, if you're trying to figure out how to unmask, the takeaways I would offer to you is to consider something creative or physical. It can be a group or solo thing. And I'd also love to hear your suggestions for unmasking, as I am very actively working to figure this out for myself. It's a new thing for me to actively be doing. And I remind everybody, remember, if you've met one person on the spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum. And at the same time, the personal is universal. So thanks for listening. Namaste.